Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. My name is Myrna Stone, and I'm absolutely delighted to take part in the Ohioana Book Festival with my latest book entitled The Resurrectionist's Diary. And I'm going to be reading the title poem. The Resurrectionist's Diary, Wednesday, 17 March, 1830. Yesterday, half past the darkling hour, we took from Popper's Corner in the South End burying ground a woman's freshly interred body, her face a book writ large in pain, and her two infant daughters laid upon her breast, their torsos joined at the sternum, each malformed and monstrous. In fields such as these, there are no obvious arrays of sorrow, no mausoleums, vaults, urns, stones, the distressed earth emblem enough of loss, which on the morrow must needs be profit. If not the life John and I envisaged, it is an enterprise that feeds and clothes us and our boys. Want, we persuade ourselves, defies all seemly creeds and our own human covenants, as Boston's environs riddle with graves. Less than a day hence, 2 more will be dug on the Tremont side of the old granary grounds in a plot adjacent to Park Street Church. Their tenants, a young Tuscan couple of raw morals and strange beauty, lost in a blatant act of ardor as their coachman ran amok. They, like the mother and babes, are the very stuff of anatomist's dreams and will not lack for buyers. Thus, John delays supper tonight to prepare for tomorrow's retrieval. I hear him in the shed as I write, and Belle's soft nickering as he moves about her. Often I think if we do evil in God's eyes, our good Belle is surely blind to it. Now comes the bells of shovels dropped in the wagon's bed, the whoosh of canvas tarps, the tick and clatter of shuttered lanterns. Our work is not without risk, though we take only the dead, never their goods, never their souls. Such is our worth. Thursday, 6 May, 1830. A large mongrel, made up of little more than mat and bone, hobbled last night our retrieval of an old man's body, whose battered feet bore witness to vagrancy. The mutt, too, meandered, black and liminal as the night, before its eyes reflecting the amber light of our lanterns. A mulish cur, who at first refused to leave the grave's mound until we used the threat of our shovels against it, then ghosted us all the way home. Surely a hound from hell, John said, its tongue lolling from its jaw as it lagged behind the wagon. Or perhaps from heaven, I countered, love's eloquence in its dumb, open maw. The night was like that, a kind of dark fancy, caprice with uncommon talk. At dawn, however, sense reasserted itself, except in the boys who fed the dog grease congealed from yesterday's supper, which it wolfed down and promptly heaved up. It is an unkindness, I told them, to offer it anything, and recounted in full the ways in which the creature is nearly as done as its master. But they were deaf and began to ladle water from the bucket to a bowl so that it could plumb its thirst. At dusk this evening, John will transport the man's body to a hearse owned by a new anatomist named Spatz at a pickup point 2 blocks short of the Boston dispensary. I shall not go along, though I expect the dog will, if it survives the day. Now, lying with its head on its paws, it winnows from the alley's dirt with every breath shreds of dried pear blossoms, its gaze doggedly fixed on the tarp which rests scarcely visible on the wagon's bed. Saturday, 24 July, 1830. An hour passed in the very first issue of a penny rag dubbed the Boston Evening Transcript. I read my father's obituary, in which neither I nor his grandsons beg mention. It is just as well, since anonymity suits us in our endeavors. Too soon the boys at 9 and 11, large for their ages, will usurp me and harvest bodies alongside their father. Under the sulphurous gaze of my father, no such cogitation would have escaped my tongue or my pen's nib. Mute sufferance was my only resort, as I labored on a chaise in his library through a childhood contrived to please him, books plump upon my lap, meaty with ideas and their contraries, while he, bereft of all parental affection, discoursed on my duty as his only surviving child. At 16, I towered over him, an Amazon, he derided, unfit for intercourse of any sort, and so lacking in the feminine arts, so unlike my poor dead mother, as to cause him despair at my prospects. Scythian or not, I followed my heart, a scant 3 years later, into John's arms. He is my hearth and home, and in every want my equal. He calls me now from the alley, and the boys as quick mimic his long drawn-out, "Maggie, is supper nigh?" My father could not bring himself to call me Maggie, for it suited too well, he vowed, my hasty, fractious self. He named me Margaret Clare for my mother, whom I would never know. A decade ago, when his fortunes failed, I stole from his stored goods what I coveted most, her small brass hand mirror, a 3-legged stool, and 4 leather-bound books that smelled of caramel, sunlight, and grass. Wednesday, 22nd December, 1830. I am with child. John and I, at first taken aback, are hopeful, though we both perceive the peril of a belated pregnancy. Today we waken to the season's heaviest snow and lay tucked to bed until the pealing of St. Augustine's chapel bells roused the boys at 6. They spent the first light of morning fashioning a length of holy drab fished from an abandoned well into a cloak they fixed upon the mongrel's back. The creature crabs beneath my window even now, her whine low for a bitch, rising at the end. I have accused the boys of secretly pocketing food for her, but they avow they have not. Yet she continues to follow them and to breathe, and they, having formed an affection for her, declare that forthwith she will be named Umbra, an apt alias they proclaim for a shade who haunts us. In such conceits they are too much like me, for I school them with books forbade most children. As I write, they prepare to recite Shakespeare's Sonnet 6 tonight for John, to whom the frozen earth again offers its yearly respite from work. The boys and I have already woven a holly ring for the door and a garland for the hearth, around which we shall salve ourselves with cloven, ale, heat, and pithy verse. Each of these, invests with cheer the evening hours, carries us to our beds, and greases well the dreamscapes of our rest. If neither God nor state, priest nor parent, allows us the means to defy death, our boys may, as may this new child, a daughter, I warrant. Tuesday, 15 February, 1831. Yesterday we raised a coffin of curiosities, a wizened elfin child in a finely stitched petticoat of dimity, and a 4-legged hen tucked in neat at her ribs. Today the hen, unspoilt enough, simmers on the hearth in a stew of parsnips, onions, and rutabagas that will feed all 4 of us and Umbra. John has cut off the hen's feet and hung them in pairs from a beam above the hearth, where in their own time they will desiccate until their skin, mere husks, mimics the child's. Just before dawn, I woke to find John's hand restive on my belly, as though his fingers traced inside my womb the compass of our child. From the first, I persuaded myself the babe was a girl. Now there is no doubt of it, for she is mild, unlike the boys who roiled when I carried them, and she lodges much higher and closer to my heart. Another small mouth to feed cannot condemn us to hunger any more than we already are, John said. But I was not consoled. Thus it was I who urged him to hang the chicken's feet. Armed with a manual of white magic, I aimed to turn each of them into a talisman to ward off misfortune. Even Umbra, even in her muteness, yearns for assurance. She is taken to sleeping inside by the boy's pallet, but it is John and me she watches through the night. Often I wonder what hides beneath my very eyes, in John's odd glances, in the boy's half smiles and turned heads, in Umbra's cryptic gaze, and what in each of those advances. Saturday, 5 March, 1831. This morn, in cold as bitter and brittle as any I have known, Belle faltered in her traces by the shed and blew out 2 thick plumes of frothy blood from her nostrils. Within an hour of the hemorrhage, despite our frantic efforts to warm her and stay her terror, she was gone. What sour fate dictates such privation? Shall we now harness grief and pull the wagon ourselves, or ask Umbra to carry the dead upon her back? Shall we bow our heads in submission, dumb and undone? John, wisely having none of it, buries himself in work in the shed, while the boys, both bilious, shun all but their bed. Soon I must put down my pen and see to their misery. Yet what motherly ministering will alter mine? Last Sunday at Mass I pledged to the Virgin Mother that we would christen the babe Mary Ann in honor of her and her mother, in return for the child's safekeeping. Reason has taught me, however, that such bargaining speaks out of fear, not piety, and leads only to naught. This thought and my incessant worrying of it depresses my spirit, and worse, sows doubt into my every decision. It is the lure to the dark heart of the business we go about. God shows each of his creatures a path, the priests say, and it is up to each to tread it, or not. Belle was good, sweetness, a clearness, and come what may, we cannot replace her. John tells me the ice is fast, and the weather holds, so her flesh will keep. Therefore, even in death, she will nourish us.